Few anticipated what transpired when Princess Anne and Catherine stood in front of the cameras, a raw and heartbreaking moment that stopped the palace in its tracks. While discussing Prince Louis, the one royal who is rarely discussed, both women, who were stoic in their own manner, broke down in public. However, what caused this emotional breakdown? Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve deeper into what this actually implies for the royal family. It had begun as a charity or closed-door event that was not intended to garner media attention. There had been no official notice from the royal press office. There was only a tiny, approved documentary team that followed Anne's charitable endeavors. There were no cameras from major media. Even though Catherine's attendance wasn't confirmed until the very last minute, insiders claim that the instant Prince Louis's name was mentioned, the mood changed. Anne, who is renowned for her directness and poise, stopped in her tracks. Catherine reached for her glass of water but was unable to lift it. Nobody knew how to handle the intangible weight that hung over the occasion. After that, it broke. Anne first lowered her head, clearly shaking. When Catherine finally spoke, her voice broke as she said, "There's so much they don't know." Her eyes were filled with tears. Royal aides hurried to stop the supply in a matter of seconds. It was too late when some attempted to block the cameras and others whispered into earpieces. More significantly, those 6 seconds of uncontrollable emotion had already been witnessed and recorded. The audience watched in disbelief as the women were brought off stage, not sure if they had witnessed anything genuinely unplanned in a society governed by protocol. The atmosphere at the palace changed to one of panic. Within an hour, a crisis meeting was called. Although damage control procedures were started, the footage didn't tell the full story. The palace refrained from releasing it. According to reports, Anne and Catherine had drafted a pre-approved joint statement days beforehand, purportedly responding to rumors about Prince Louis's continued lack of public appearances. However, that claim was never made public. According to people within the palace, King Charles himself stepped in and told the press office to hold off. The only public-facing action was a vague press release characterizing the incident as intensely personal and emotionally charged. No official explanation was provided. However, that ambiguous wording did little but stoke the flames. With the video leaking within hours and trending under the hashtag #Truth, speculation exploded on social media. The collapse wasn't the only thing that worried a lot of people. It was the manner in which the royal machine attempted to erase it. Behind golden doors, palace insiders whispered of emotional exchanges and hushed silences. Just silence, no explanations or denials. In the realm of royalty, silence may convey a lot. No one in the royal family was ready for the tidal flow of discreet confessions and revelations that ensued. There is a secret chamber hidden behind Kensington Palace's opulence. Tales kept out of the public light. Rumors regarding Prince Louis's health were disregarded for many years. What were Anne and Catherine concealing up until this point? Something much more intimate was quietly taking place inside Kensington's gates, while the public was engrossed in royal appearances, festivities, and diversions planned by palace PR. Once the mischievous, energetic youngster seen in brief public appearances, Prince Louis has gradually vanished from sight. His absence, which had been slight at first, was now obvious. There have been no appearances for months. No school pictures, no family vacations, not even a shadow behind a curtained window. The youngest child in Wales seems to have vanished from the public consciousness. Insiders in the royal family have their theories. While some mentioned health concerns, others whispered about excessive protection. However, a much more unsettling reality simmered behind the rumors. Employees who were close to the family started to see trends. Louis had stopped laughing in the hallways and spoke freely. Teachers reportedly voiced worries about his reclusive conduct, with one pointing out that his eyes appeared unusually fatigued for such a young youngster. However, these observations were not appreciated. After being recorded, they were buried. Confidentiality was maintained while bringing in medical advisors. Even senior aides were instructed not to divulge their findings, if any, as they are still kept in sealed reports. Catherine, who was always passionately protective of her kids, had become increasingly reclusive. She insisted on cutting out on outside contact, turning down interviews, and canceling appointments. It was initially described as family time, but it quickly became apparent that something delicate was being protected. According to reports, she rejected the first suggestions made by specialists selected by the palace, instead contacting experts under false names and working covertly to prevent any media disclosures. The change was noted even by her closest friends. She was cautious, worn out, and emotionally strained. Anne intervened at that point. Princess Anne, who was well known for her straightforward manner and keen intuition, started paying Kensington surprise visits. She apparently was shaken by what she saw. Although the mother-son relationship remained strong, it was strained by anxiety and a mutual sense of powerlessness. According to sources, Anne and Catherine spent a lot of time in the gardens, talking quietly and going over handwritten notes and paperwork. And gradually, an unsaid thing started to surface. The two women had a peaceful understanding. Some started referring to it as a decision contract. Although the specifics of that agreement are still unknown, its effects are felt at all levels of the royal family. According to others, Anne counseled Catherine to keep Louis away from royal events permanently. Others think the agreement included a promise to address the monarchy head-on if Louis' illness was ever misused or misinterpreted. There is even evidence that Anne threatened to quit her job if she was made to remain silent. Meanwhile, medical professionals have declined to comment. Regarding Louis' condition, not a single official statement has been released. Comment requests are greeted with icy silence. It is strong enough to supersede customary royal protocol, whatever is being guarded inside Kensington. Additionally, queries are no longer being whispered due to the growing emotional toll. They're being yelled at. The emotional cost of silence was becoming intolerable for the women concerned, even as the palace kept its secrets. It was more than a mother's instinct. It was an act of desperation. Shaking hands and a warning accompanied Princess Anne's midnight appeal to her brother, King Charles. "He's leaving us." Why did she feel the need to speak up so quickly and defy royal protocol? Anne had been the monarchy's iron pillar for decades. She was calm, collected, and frequently written off as distant. However, she was neither calm nor collected in the dead of night within Clarence House's walls. She was frightened. Something had shifted in Anne after weeks of uncomfortable quiet and whispered conversations with Catherine behind the castle doors. The burden of silence was too much for her to bear. So, in defiance of every principle of discretion that had been ingrained in her since she was a young kid, she called Charles unexpectedly, without warning, and in a way that was not typical of her. When Anne arrived, Charles was still in his private quarters, apparently taken by surprise. The two of them, siblings by blood but royals separated by duty, met for more than an hour without the presence of advisors, assistants, or a press secretary. Those closest to the king recall his demeanor afterward as haunted, but what Anne said in that room is still considered unofficial. One source claims that Anne began with a terrifying statement: "Nobody notices that he is falling through the cracks." There was no denying the necessity. Anne didn't use hypothetical language. She provided instances. Nobody dared to identify the indicators of alienation, the emotional instability, and the withdrawn demeanor. She expressed her concerns that Prince Louis was failing from inside, even though he was surrounded by the greatest in the kingdom. She also made it obvious that workers and experts weren't the only ones at fault. Charles's own crown served as its foundation. However, Charles did not respond as Anne had anticipated. Yes, he paid attention, but he kept thinking about optics and how this may affect how the public saw the Wales family. He expressed worries about possible leaks, press intrusion, and the possibility of misunderstandings. It was more of the same image than intervention, in Anne's opinion. She made it clear to him that the monarchy had once permitted Diana to be destroyed by silence. She reportedly told him, her eyes wet, "We promised we wouldn't let that happen again." Then came the threat: which was motivated by resolve rather than malice. Anne, who had never courted attention or played media games, informed Charles that if the palace kept stalling, she would speak, not as a princess or a royal, but as an aunt who would not watch helplessly as a child languished behind velvet curtains. She cautioned that she would voice her concerns through humanitarian endeavors, public statements, and even off-the-record disclosures if needed. It was a pledge rather than a plea. The king took some time to react. The room was silent for much too long. That quiet was the confirmation Anne had been waiting for. She felt the fight had just begun as she walked slowly and heavily out of Clarence's house. However, another wave of internal disobedience broke out, this time from within Catherine's own group, before Charles could react. Until she wasn't, Catherine was always calm and collected. She confessed to a former assistant at a vulnerable and worn-out moment, which permanently altered the story. "I have no idea how to get in touch with him anymore." A cornerstone of the contemporary monarchy was the image of Catherine, who was beautiful, graceful, and balanced. She stood for maternal strength, warmth, and continuity. Beneath that picture, however, was a lady engaged in a struggle that few people were aware of. She had been juggling a reality that was in stark contrast to the narrative the palace presented for months. Her youngest child, who used to be the light in every room, was getting farther and farther away from her despite having the ideal family, home, and heir. After yet another challenging day with Louis, Catherine eventually let the facade fall during one of those restless evenings. A former assistant, who was still devoted but no longer employed, had been asked to take a private stroll around the royal grounds. Formalities, small talk, and updates kicked off the conversation. However, as they strolled and the silence between them deepened, Catherine muttered the words that had been destroying her. "I have no idea how to get in touch with him anymore." Startled, the assistant remained silent. Catherine went on. She talked about the hollow stares, the abrupt silences, and the bewilderment in his eyes. She acknowledged that she had done everything, including changing habits, relieving pressure, and even seeing private doctors who weren't part of the palace's recommended network. Nothing was functioning. Worst of all, she thought the palace was exacerbating the situation. And so the questions surrounding the royal family continue to grow. Behind the palace walls, where tradition and silence have ruled for generations, emotions are beginning to surface in ways the public has rarely seen before. Princess Anne's midnight warning, Catherine's heartbreaking confession, and the sudden emotional breakdown caught on camera have left many wondering what is really happening behind closed doors. Is this simply the pressure of royal life, or is there a deeper story the palace is still trying to keep hidden? For now, the royal family remains silent, but history has shown that silence inside the palace rarely lasts forever. And when the truth finally emerges, it may change the way the world sees the monarchy forever. If you want to stay updated on every new royal development, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next breaking update. Because in the world of the royal family,